Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to BLAW Live. So glad we're here tonight to bring to you another segment in a session on women in leadership. We want to let you know, just share with somebody and tell them that we're on. And we have a special guest tonight that I'm sure that you'll be blessed to hear and really find inspiring to hear. Tonight, our special guest with us is Dr. Victoria Greer, who's the interim superintendent for the Cambridge Public Schools in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Uh, just to let you know that Dr. Greer is a dedicated teacher and she's an educational leader, and her career spans 23 years across the 2 states and 4 school districts. She's the proud of her Southern roots, and she's grown up in a small town, Tennessee. And Dr. Greer is fortunate to have this dedicated role models and those who have really nurtured her in her career field. She's also a basketball and track a star, and she's actually done a lot of athletics in her time. She has a big dream, and she values hard work and teamwork, and she attributes all of this to her really upbringing, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And one of Dr. Greer's primary goals as an educator is that, in a professional, is that she wants to lead and make a broad and lasting impact on the public education and cultivate communities of care, to care and belonging, and also to help every student reach their excellence in education and just have a long life of success for their families. And she also wants to see that for the community. So we're happy to have her with us, and it's been a long day, but thank you for the sacrifice, Dr. Greer, to come and be a part of BLAW Live. How are you today?
Well, thank you. And thank you all for having me. You didn't have to ask, but I appreciate being here and having this chat with you.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to be here, and I know that you have a very busy schedule. For those of you who are on BLAW Live, you might have some questions that you want to either put in the chat or you have some comments. Please take the liberty to do that as we just have a discussion about women in leadership. And so, Dr. Greer,
Sure.
we've been talking about women in leadership, and we want to talk about your leadership. And so, when you think back some time ago, maybe growing up, when it comes to leadership, um, what are the lessons that were instilled within you to become the person that you are today?
Oh, wow. That's actually a really good question. I think about it. I know one of the things that my parents taught us, my sister and I, was to always dream big, constantly instilled in us like our value, that we were valued, that we were intelligent, and that we could go off and do great things. And they firmly believed that having a good education would get us to our dreams, because both of my parents had grade school education. So education was actually very valued in our home. And I think about that. And then um, in the Yander house, that's my maiden name. In the Yander house, you were respectful, you were kind, you were loving, and you had high integrity. Your word was your bond. You do what you say. And so I even say today, I tell everyone, even when I'm going in to secure employment as I have here, my integrity is not for sale. And so if I have to, make compromises around my belief systems and my integrity, then this is not the place for me. And so that definitely was instilled early on, and it definitely has been a driver for me in the work that I've been able to do over the years.
Wow, that's incredible that, all of these principles that were instilled in you are really paying off as you have climbed the ladder to be the interim superintendent of the Cambridge Public Schools. So when it comes to this position that you have, I know it's not easy because when you think about all the challenges that you have, and I think about all the challenges you have to face, getting our students back in buildings, our teachers back teaching during this pandemic. What are some of the challenges that maybe the audience doesn't know? Well, hey, it's school. what's, you just have kids back in school, but maybe you have some challenges that they may not be aware of. What could you say to the audience tonight about your challenges that you have as a leader?
Sure, sure. I mean, unfortunately, in the context of where we are coming, I call it post-pandemic because as one of our medical advisors have began to advise us, it's like COVID is now going to be more like the flu. So we're entering what they call an endemic. It's just going to be part of our life. Um, so as we are re-entering school, Cambridge Public Schools stayed closed for quite a while, longer than many other districts where students were not in person for school. So there definitely has been this reacclimation period, and we are faced with a lot of challenges. One being that students left us 18 months ago. So for example, our 11th graders at the high school, they were only ninth graders. They had just entered high school when the pandemic hit. And so their high school experience is truly a ninth grader's high school experience. So we have 11th graders that in many regards are acting and responding as a ninth grader. And the same for ninth graders who are entering the high school. They're coming to us as seventh graders because they had never been within the walls of a high school. So that's one challenge, is just students not necessarily maturing to the level that we think that they should be at, like age-wise, grade-wise. Yes, they're at these spaces. However, but time-wise, they're stuck where they were, or they are still where they were when the pandemic hit. So that's a challenge. Educators coming back and having to look at not only learning loss, but many of the social emotional needs that students are having. And one of the, I think, stark realities that we're having, as far as not just myself, but I just think leaders across many school districts, is that our staff, they're coming back with many of their own social, emotional, mental health needs that were impacted through the pandemic. So balancing all of that and still keeping the focus on high quality education, having to make the hard calls to say, guys, I know that people are hurting mentally, physically, and emotionally. However, we also are as an education institution. We have to teach children. They have to read. We have to have children reading. We can't stop teaching children to read. There are just some things that we have to do, but being thoughtful and reflective enough to empathize with understanding how difficult it is for folks, and in trying to support them through this difficult space that we're in. And that looks many different ways. It's from appreciating the work that they're doing. It's from recognizing the challenges. I think sometimes just acknowledging that it's hard for people goes a very long way. And they need to know that those of us who are standing at the top saying, well, this is the work, we have to do it, that they also feel appreciated and valued for what the time and the effort that they're putting into it.
Wow, that sounds just like it's a lot going on. So
It
it sounds like it's a lot going on. As you're talking about the challenges that you're facing and some of those concerns and issues, as a woman in leadership leading a school system, um, and you're coming from the South
Yeah,
and you're here in the North,
I am.
how does that challenge for you when it comes to the culture of the South, coming to the North, and also as a woman in leadership?
Sure. Oh, wow. So first of all, I was water baptized to the North. We've been here 8 years now. I'm always going to be a Southerner. I think that there definitely has been a learning curve, and there are very differences, both good and not so good on both sides. I think my time in the South has served me well here, as far as the experience, because the one thing in the South is that we don't have the resources that we have here in Massachusetts. Even some of our neediest districts in Massachusetts are still more resourced or well resourced than any of the districts that I work for in the South. And so I've learned how to do a lot of different things in many different ways, just because foundationally my career started there. And I think I brought that to the work that I've been able to do here, in Massachusetts. And it's made a huge difference in my perspective about the work. things that are seemingly hard for most people, I kind of look at it and just I always see the glass half full rather than half empty. So that has definitely served me well. Um, some of the cultural things that I have definitely had to get accustomed to is that I was taught to be a servant. I not only do I have Southern roots, I have Southern Christian roots. And so I've learned about servant leadership probably from the age that I was very young, because at that point you better, once you can walk in a Southern church, you serve. And so I understand the concept of servant leadership. And so that's definitely something that I've taken with me just as a teacher in the classroom and even now. Um, but it's also served me in really great ways in my leadership here in Massachusetts, but in other ways, it has not served me so well in regards to I put it all out there. I leave it, I'm an athlete, so I leave it all on the court. Sometimes you have to know that you got to take care of yourself first, especially being a woman in leadership. We tend to work sometimes twice or three times as hard as the average male. Uh, and we do that because we're still trying to overcome all of these historical things in relation to women leading and being able to be in these spaces. And so I've had to learn to rebalance myself around that servant leadership and knowing that I don't have to leave it all on the court to do a great job and to serve my community and serve in my organization well.
Oh, that's great. To dig a little deeper, as you talked about a little bit about your responsibilities and the broadening of that when it comes to the public schools, but you also have family. And
Mhm.
so how do you balance? I know we talked about balancing, but what are
Yeah.
the things you can say to the audience about how does a woman in leadership balance a very high level pressure job
Mhm.
and work with their spouse and work with their children?
Yeah. So first of all, there is no such thing as balance. I use that term. I actually, in the way I view it, I call it a rhythm of grace, because that's what you need constantly is grace, and you just get in this rhythm of grace. And so, um, because there's really not when we say balance, work life balance, there's really not a such thing, because there are going to be times in your life and in your trajectory that there are going to be things in your work that just supersede everything. You just have to keep your perspective and focus and know what's most important, what you value, and who's most important and who comes first, right? Um, and so thinking about that and being a parent and a mom, I have this hierarchy: God first, my husband, and then my children. And even though I'm in this career, I work really, really hard to put boundaries around that. There's never a question. I'm upfront with it from the get go and from the beginning. And then also understanding that I have to take care of myself to be the best leader I can be within the school district, but also to be a good mother and a good wife. I have to take time for myself to recharge, to re-energize, to meditate, to pray, to have fun, the fun that I want to do, not fun that's tied to my husband, not fun that's tied to my children, not fun that's tied to my coworkers, but things I like to do for me. That's how you get into that rhythm. And also give yourself grace. When I say rhythm of grace, it's like you're asking, like I ask my children, like, is mommy working too much? Like we have this check-in in my home, and it's like, what do you need from me? And so we talk about that, and my children know, James and the third know that they can say, "Mommy, we miss you. You've been doing the most," is what third tells me. You've been doing the most, and I'm like, dude, like he was like, you didn't come home for dinner 3 nights. I need you at the house. And so we have this check and balance with our family that helps keep it in check. My extended family helps keep it in check. My sister is going to call in probably about 15 minutes to say, where are you? And I bet either you need to be at the house or very close to it. So that's just, you have to make sure that you have those people in your spaces to help you keep this rhythm of grace going.
No, that's good. That's very insightful. So when it comes to um, being at this level of leadership that you're at, And maybe talk about when you came in, was there a lot of men that you had to deal with in your sphere of influence versus, maybe it might have been a very diverse group, but were there a lot of men in that particular role?
When I came into the superintendency, or when I came into the superintendency in Cambridge?
Okay, when you came into Cambridge.
Um, there has been another female leader as far as the superintendency is concerned. I will say I have inherited a really great team that, believe it or not, is outbalanced. There are more women than men. And there are more women of color on the team. And so this is actually very unique. I've never experienced that before. So coming to Cambridge, it definitely has been a different experience as far as having more women in leadership within the district at many different levels, especially at the executive leadership level.
Great. I think I got a question. I think I got a question from an admirer of yours,
Oh gosh,
James Greer.
James Greer.
Wants to know why you, mommy, like being a superintendent.
Why do I like being a superintendent? Oh my gosh. Um, it is because I want to change um, the futures for young people. You know, I grew up, as I said, rural poor, and was taught the value of education and how education opens the door to opportunity. I have experienced that myself, going from generational poverty and 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 moving into generational wealth, going from poverty to now being able to raise my family as a middle class. Um, and it changes the trajectory. And I want other young people to have that experience. And I know, especially for young folks who look like me, and young women who look like me, we have a lot of barriers that we just face in life. And I want to be a conduit to open doors and open doors of opportunity. And also, one of the greatest things that I have experienced by, especially by being here in Cambridge, and I experienced in my other superintendency as well, is when I walk in and little brown girls look and they smile and they get excited. I was at the high school a couple of weeks ago, and a group of teenage girls were just like, "You're the what?" And they couldn't believe it. And so just knowing that they can see themselves in you is huge for me. And that, honestly, that if I can influence in that way, so that young people can see themselves at that level, then that makes my day. And that's what makes me love being a superintendent, is opening doors for other young people.
Wow, that's great. It is inspiring to see someone like yourself in positions of authority and leadership, and being at a place where you probably just kind of only thought about that you could be in, but you actually can see someone like you being in that position. So, you do our hearts proud being visible like you are.
Thank you.
So when it comes to your faith, you talked a little about your faith. Um, faith is something that sometimes people only use when the chips are down. So how does that work when it comes to the everyday, what they call the grind?
Uh, wow. I have the skin of a crocodile. I have some battle scars. And so I've learned that lesson about only accessing my faith when the going gets tough. I know that faith is continual, it's every day, it's my life. It is part of the fiber of who I am. And so and I work really, really hard to walk it out and live it in so many different ways. And the one way I do it, one is that God gets my time first. Like that's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. I have a ritual in my car. I have a ritual with my family. I just have these that's become part of my life, of how I do life. And praying, meditating, journaling as part of that, listening for the voice of God, when I come into my workplace, there are times people don't know this, but I guess I'm letting my secret out. I anoint this place often. Sometimes as I'm going from school to school, because I believe that God allows you to go in and take the land for Him. And so I will drive through Cambridge and just pray. And because I know that this community needs that. God didn't put me here for myself. He put me here because He has a purpose and a plan for His people. And so that's the people of Cambridge at this point. And because of that, I just try to walk it out. I'm not perfect. I do mess up. There are times that when that alarm clock goes off at 4:30, 5 o'clock, I'm like, Jesus, like really, I got to get up and pray. Um, but I push and I do my best to make it happen. So um, and recognizing that I know why I'm here. I recognize that I'm not here for myself. It is only by the grace of God that I'm here.
That's great. We have a question from our audience, and they're asking, what advice would you give to parents of color who feel overwhelmed with the educational system and to ensure how to support their children or their grandchildren, even how to support them?
Yeah. Um, you cannot get weary in doing well. Um, yes, it is. I even have my own moments. So let me say that I am an educator by life and trade, trained to do it, know the jargon, know it. And there are moments that I have gotten overwhelmed, making sure that my own children were okay. So first of all, it is okay to feel that. And then second of all, know that I always say advocate, and there's a way that you advocate, right? You have to position yourself to understand that you are your child or your grandchild's first teacher. And so while there are sometimes situations where you may feel like your voice is minimized at that table when you walk into your child's school or engage with them, you have to remind folks that at the end of the day, this child is your personal responsibility. And be very clear about that, and then talk about partnering with the school. I also say, let's connect as families. I believe in families connecting with families, connecting with groups, because there are always other people out here that can help support us. I'm happy to provide resources for people as well. I can give that to you offline, Bishop and others, so we can create these networks so people know who to call for what. But I think that's huge. And also, as a family of color, I know this is something that may sound crazy. White allies uh, are important for us and our children. And I have used them myself. I have a couple of Caucasian friends, and I've had challenges with my own children. And there was a meeting that my husband could not go to. I took my white ally with me. So know that you can partner with white allies. The crazy thing is, it's unfortunate, but we're still living in these times that people sometimes see our color before they see who we are inside. And so I say leverage your support, and then go in confidence, knowing that you may not know the jargon, you may not know every technical term, but what you do know is your child, and you do know what your child is not getting, and you may not know what their child needs, but you know that they need something. And that's what I try to say that to my teachers too as well. You have to hear the voice of families. They may not know all the technical things, but they know when their child is in need, and you need to listen to them and help them problem solve around that.
That's great. Advocacy is definitely a need, and I thank God for I had parents and siblings and people who were actually in the school system to help me to get through school, and I definitely agree. Advocacy is so important. So what would you say to parents about their own education?
Mhm.
And the reason I'm saying that because um, I know as an adult that in parenting, as my children were going through school, um, how do you balance, this thing about, okay, you finish school, you're parenting a child, but how does education fit with adults and their children?
Right. Let me clarify. You're asking about a parent trying to continue their own education?
Correct.
Yeah. I if I can tell a little story to get to the answer. So I had a plan. First of all, I never planned to be a superintendent. It just kind of happened. I never, I always knew I wanted to get my doctorate degree. I did know that. And so when I was planning that, life kind of happened, and Walter and I actually had a relocation move. And this was before we ended up in Massachusetts. This was years ago. This is before we had children and everything. And so, long story short, we ended up moving from Nashville to Memphis, and then from Memphis back to Nashville, Tennessee. So we get back to Nashville, and I had undergraduate school at that point in time. And so the goal was to finish this doctorate. And then I found out I was pregnant uh, with the third. And I was like, hold up. I was like, I have to finish this dissertation I got to finish this before this little boy gets here, or else it's not going to get done. God had another plan. I did not finish it before that little boy got there. I was 1 year shy of finishing my dissertation. And you know what? Between having the support of my husband and other family members, I was able to finish up third Greer because I had to travel for my cohort group. At 6 months old, this little boy was on a plane with me and his father going. I think we went to San Antonio. I can't remember where we went. We ended up in Texas because I used to go everywhere to meet with my cohort group for my doctorate. And we had him traveling, packed him up at 6 months old. He's going with us. He was a year old when I walked across that stage and graduated. And he was waiting for me at the end when that was over. So what I say is, don't let life stop you. If that's the goal, then you may have to take a break or step to the side and recalibrate, but don't stop. Like, know that you can influence your entire generation as a result of you seeking out further education and training for yourself, and that your children actually have high respect for you. When he learned how to talk, I was Dr. Mommy for a while. And so just know how much that influences your own children to see you push through, even when they're like, I don't even know how she's doing it. I don't know how I did it either. It's, again, the grace of God.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great. Question that came up from the audience is this, when I just want to just toss this one at you. How can we, or meaning the school system, support teachers of color who are trying to help Black students excel like their white counterparts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, that's actually a very good question. And I think that it starts with the school system needing to recognize that the recruitment and the retention of teachers of color matter for our students, especially in a district like Cambridge, when we have a large majority of our student population are students of color and families of color, and also families from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. Um, and so recruitment and retention practices are very important for us in that regard. And that's what districts should be focused on and doing. That's what something that we're doing here. Um, Another area is to create affinity groups for teachers of color. That kind of goes hand in hand with the retention piece, because many persons of color, and I've been one of those people where you're the only person of color in your school in a grade level. And so that's a little difficult. So you need persons who understand your challenges. And I think the more we leverage those things and create these spaces for teachers of color to flourish in their skills, to know how to advocate for not just children of color, but all children in the way that they need to, I think that opens the door. I think also when you think about being a teacher of color in a district, you have great influence, whether you believe it or not. And I think learning as much as you can about the district, that's something that I did, because as I was a teacher, I just kept asking all these questions about why does this not work? Why does that not work? And that's what eventually led me into leadership, because I kept having these thoughts and ideas. Not that I was trying to be critical of the leaders, I needed to understand. And I think that if you position yourself to understand the way that the system works, you actually then can help change the system in a better way for children.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. We have about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Final question before we end. What would you say to the audience about the equipping of leaders, and how do you, as a leader, equip other leaders?
Mhm, mhm. So let me say this. My philosophy is that if you are a leader that is not teaching and cultivating other leaders, then you're not leading. You're just in a position and you're just holding a seat. And so it's extremely important as a leader that you cultivate the skills of other leaders, that you teach them how to lead, you teach them how to think like a leader. Um, Being in this educational realm, believe it or not, there's a lot of politics that go into being an educational leader. And one of the biggest challenges from my vantage point in the seat that I sit in is learning how to navigate those politics, and being a leader that can teach others how to navigate that so that you can do the real work is extremely important. And I think, when we start talking about cultivating other leaders, understanding that your learning doesn't stop yourself. So in order for you to teach someone else, you have to keep learning. So if you looked around my office, I have all kinds of, I read a lot. I listen to people. I still have mentors. I still have leadership coaches myself that I keep as part of my space. And that's so that I can continue to cultivate my own skills so I can help then design the skills of others. Starting tomorrow, my whole executive leadership team, we're behind closed doors for 3 days at a leadership retreat, working on our leadership skills and our team dynamics and how we work together. Also being bold enough to say we're going to take a pause and work on us being good so everyone who we have responsibility for can be even better.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Greer.
Thank you for having me.
And for those of you who are here tonight, we thank you for joining us here at BLAW Live. Remember, as we're here on Tuesday evenings, we're here to encourage you, we're here to inspire you. And also we're talking about women in leadership. And so next week we'll be having another guest on, and we'll be letting you know who's going to be on. In fact, well, I'll just tell you right now, Pastor Lorraine Thornhill she'll be our leader next week, and she'll be sharing about a lot about what she's doing in pioneering this whole focus on mental health as well. So we're excited about having her with us next week. So for now, we say God bless. Have a good evening. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you. May he keep you. And you know what? I pray that you would be at peace and have his shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken until we see each other again. Have